Hi, Gloria Lybecker with Healing You. Have you ever felt really excited to get to see someone and then been really surprised or taken off balance by how they responded to seeing you? Oh, I'm imagining the needs for predictability and a sense of care in relationships might come up from time to time in your day-to-day life. These are very familiar needs for me, along with I really enjoy it when I live with a sense of being in congruence and having the ability to make meaning in the midst of moments that I feel off balance. And I've been pondering around how we are interconnected and how we are intentionally, or I can speak for myself, intentionally seek a way to have solid ground in my life, to grow resiliency so that I'm able to stay present in a way that I'm creating meaning and finding purpose in each moment of my life, especially as a parent. Because when I'm able to perceive and make sense of and respond to any of my children's needs, then I'm actually co-creating with them an internal working model for safety and security that my children can rely on in their lives. Excuse me. I remember when my youngest son was, it must have been about 10 years ago or more. He was eating and sleeping a lot because he was going through a really big growth spurt. And because he was a very sensitive child, it was a big stimulus for him. And so I could imagine that his nerve endings may have even felt like they were on fire. And so his window of tolerance was really shrunken down. He was so excited one day when he got to go spend the night with his older brother at the older brother's house. And the next day, when I went to spend some time with him and take care of my small grandchildren, he was making grumpy faces at me, and then he moved away when I went to reach out for connection. At the time, I was very confused, and I was wanting to be able to understand what was going on. And I remember I stopped him in the hallway because I wanted to connect with him, just the two of us. What he did, though, because I took hold of his arms, well, in his heightened state, I'm imagining now that he felt a little trapped, and he began wriggling around and resisting connection. And as he squirmed down to the ground, I was doing my best to stay with him. And I just said, "Hey, what's going on here? I just want to slow it down to connect with you for a moment." And then unexpectedly, his foot caught with my shin, and there was unexpected pain that was coursing through me. So that was magnified for me as the parent because my 2-year-old grandson I saw had come around the corner and he was watching. And I said to him, this like a burst of fierce love. I said, "Hey, do you know how much you're loved?" And he shouted back at me, "No, let go of me. I hate you." And in that moment, time kind of stood still within me. I had tears in my eyes, and I'm like, "Oh, I love you. The Bubbas are here, and they love you too. They're watching and listening right now." And by acknowledging this, by acknowledging what is, which is part of resonant language, my son was able to slow down his movements, and he was able to start to take in the environment of where we were. And his eyes softened as he saw his little nephew, who was drawing closer to us. And this little guy, he said, "Gunkle sad?" He's only 2. And then he asked, "Hug Gunkle?" And he reached out and embraced his uncle and gave him a kiss. And then he rested his head on his uncle. My son's eyes, they were just wet with tenderness, and they met mine as he received this gift of unconditional love. And he said, "Oh, thank you, Andrew. Uncle feels much better now with your love." In that moment, I actually was able to notice that I was holding my breath. And I felt my body as it began to relax, and I drew in a sigh of relief. I was so touched and amazed by the power of this unconditional love and presence. So I took a moment to acknowledge to myself just how big it feels for me as the parent when my child is facing these challenges in becoming his full self. And so in the moment, it helped for me just to imagine and remember a circle of close friends that I have who hold me with unconditional, compassionate understanding. And it really supported me to return to a state of calm where I could realign myself with my intention to remain unconditionally present with this young man who's my son. Later on, I was getting some much needed empathy support from some others, and using that as my observation. And I realized that the biggest moment of intensity that I felt, some real horror, that my little grandson had witnessed what I perceived as an act of violence. And as I slowly reconnected to my experience with eyes of compassion, I was able to recognize a response pattern of terror and fear that had been activated by deeply embedded memories that I had in interaction with an older child when I was younger. And it was the first time that I'd actually connected viscerally with how my limbic system, my emotional alarm system, would become flooded in the presence of some of the behaviors of my son. So from an interpersonal neurobiology perspective, the mental model that was ingrained within me from repeated experiences or repeated patterns of past experiences with an older child, it was retained in my implicit memory, like super glued in there. And it would be activated without a sense that in the moment something was being recalled. And it was directly influencing my perception, my emotions, my behaviors, and my bodily sensations. So by using this self-resonance practice and in the presence of others, which then expounds it, it supports me tenfold more by bringing in their resonance with me, I was able to take more deep breaths and really pay attention to the bodily sensations that I was having. And I remember my heart felt like it was huge and it was on fire, like it was going to burst with the pain it was holding in. And there was also this constant roar in my aching head. And as I witnessed my inner experience in this way, I had a dawning new awareness around what was happening or what had happened in my childhood and how that connected with present time. And it dawned on me that a very little girl, a part of myself, had been stuck in this place of fear in time outside of time. And the overwhelming sensations made perfect sense when I could see that this little girl part of me didn't know that I had survived my experiences with an older child. Oh, gosh. So as I was able to, with support, have an inner dialogue, excuse me, inner parts dialogue with my compassionate witness being present with the terrified child part, so that this little part of me that was desperately needing to be seen and heard and held in real time would be able to experience somebody finally seeing with compassion what had happened for me as a child. What was really astonishing was my little girl part was incredibly worried about the other child and really wanted the other child to be held too. In the moment, it was a real surprise to take in, because I recognized that there had been so much fear around this relationship. And yet at the same time, I tapped into how much I really do love this person. It's just astonishing the amount of love that children have unconditionally for others in their life. And I still sit with it even today. It's so helpful to name it and to anchor this fierce love within me. So while I was in conversation with the little girl part of self, I was able to tell her that she'd survived the experiences that she'd had when she was little. And I showed how old I was, and she laughed out loud. So there's something about taking in the wisdom that this little girl part of myself had been holding for so long, until she'd been able to release that intensity of her experience in her body, which is my body. And it was mainly in my belly and in my heart. And when I was able to allow those sensations to be experienced in real time without making them wrong, no judgments, but just being present, allowing them to be, then it's like this little girl part was willing for herself and the other child to truly be found and connected with, to be held in that process of integration. And the blessing I received is new wisdom from my body connection that I didn't have before. You know, having this child part believing that, death was imminent, was able to know that the compassionate present part, she didn't know what I knew now, that when there's parts that are fractured and they're splintered and they're in time beyond time, as we can connect with them and actually viscerally bring them back, they bring gifts with them. And they also receive the gifts of what our compassionate or present day self has learned. But there's really something powerful around the innocence of a little child's love and forgiveness for those they care for and those they're nurtured by. And there was something about that made this connection happen for me, having my 2-year-old grandson compassionately present, that actually brought that really little part of me out to be received and held by my compassionate witness. Both parts really wanted to hold space for someone they love and know is in pain. The older child really had nurtured me more than anyone, because we were left alone a lot. And I imagine that when my son acts out, excuse me, it's due to him flipping his lid. And so as I consistently have done my best to respond to him with fierce love guiding me, I've been able to model something radically different for him, for myself, and for any other little kids who are near me, and for whoever happened to witness my response. And that's the kind of love that I'm about. And I choose to claim for life, for children, for all children, and for myself. I acknowledge that the little girl part of me understood this, and she taught it to the compassionate witness part of me. I believe with a fierce determination that the times that my son I would find him flailing about, he needed me to stay present in relationship with him as he found his way back to presence himself. And at the same time, I have practiced self-resonance by attending to my own needs of self-care. And as I've continued my own journey, I'm empowered to remain present in brand new ways. It expands and opens up my own ability to have a wider window of welcome in relationships with others, which has empowered my son to develop something very similar. I really appreciate what it took in my journey for this part of myself to integrate. And thank all those that have worked alongside of me. Trusted others continues to be a really huge part for healing. What amazing beings we are. It truly is never too late to heal. Our brains can alter synaptic connections and grow new neurons, especially in the integrative regions. When we have new interpersonal experiences that promote an internal sense of security, self-understanding, and a willingness to try new approaches to connect with others. Thanks for being on this journey with me today. Healing you.